do have your cooperation and help in our various academic activities. So thank you, Dr. Monica. Please go ahead.
All right. First of all, my namaskar to everyone who is here. And today I'm going to talk about India's relations with Bangladesh. And I'm going to speak for like 20-30 minutes. I'll try to cover all the aspects that are necessary to be talked about in this lecture. And once I have discussed all the points which are important, I think Sir will open the floor to question and answers. So I think that will be a good time for a two-way discussion. Beginning my lecture, I think five things I want to speak here first. And my whole lecture is going to focus on the five aspects of India's relations with Bangladesh. And I think most important aspects I have included. I have not tried to talk about. See, when it comes to relations between two countries, we can talk about n number of things. But to keep the focus sharp, I have focused on only five things. First of all, I'll put Bangladesh in perspective that why do we need to talk about India's relations with Bangladesh? Why is Bangladesh an important neighbor of India? What kind of, relations India has with Bangladesh currently? We will, after that, we will move to discuss the historical trajectory of India's relations with Bangladesh. All of us know what happened in 1971, how Bangladesh was created, and the liberation war where India played a great role. But after that, the relations evolved into something not so nice, into something which were very problematic, a lot of animosity between India and Bangladesh. And from there onwards, the entire trajectory of how it stands today. This will be the second point that I'll focus on. In the third point, I'll focus on how the relations have finally transformed into a mature partnership, into a very, very serious development partnership. How things have changed in Bangladesh and how things have changed in India. What are the causes for this, because of which the relations have transformed into a very mature and a stable relationship. So that I'm going to talk about in the third point. Then I'm also going to focus on, why this change is taking place, why all these years there was a lot of animosity, and how India and Bangladesh have been able to keep that at bay. And they have now started focusing on, constructive things. They have started speaking about cooperation across multiple domains. So why exactly that change has taken place? Finally, I'll speak about the way forward, and that would include, me making an attempt to discuss the challenges which are faced by India in having a good neighborly relationship with Bangladesh, the kind of irritants that keep on coming between India and Bangladesh, and I'll also focus on the opportunities that we have. So we are going to focus on all of this. And most importantly, I think all these five aspects will help you understand not just how their relations have evolved in past, but they will also help you understand the future trajectory of India-Bangladesh relations. So let me just start off by talking about India's, when I say India's relations with Bangladesh, I think the most important thing that we need to understand here is what kind of a neighbor Bangladesh is. Why is Bangladesh one of the most important neighbors that India has? And what is my reason for, of taking interest in Bangladesh particularly? See, my PhD thesis was focusing on regional integration in South Asia. As a part of it, I was looking at economic integration between India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. And the reason for picking these three countries was because of the economic rationale that these were the largest three economies in South Asia. But still, my interest in Bangladesh has continued from a long time. I remember me writing to Sir for accepting a journal article in his prestigious journal where I'd written about how the trajectory has changed between India and Bangladesh. So I think why my interest is there so much and why all of us, should actually be taking interest in Bangladesh is because, first of all, it is a neighbor which has a 4,000-kilometer long boundary with India. So out of all the neighbors, India is a very large country. And by the virtue of being a large country, we share our borders with multiple countries. And luckily, we are situated in a geography where not only we share a land-time boundary, but we also share a maritime boundary with multiple countries. But when it comes to Bangladesh, why it's so important is because we share a contiguous border of 4,000 kilometers. And when we see that two countries are sharing that border, a border that large, then it is in a way a good thing because, there is a lot of scope for cross-border relationships, cross-border economic and other kinds of partnerships. But then at the same time, it is also sort of a security challenge. So whatever happens in Bangladesh, whatever happens in India, ultimately does affect polity on both sides. So I think This is why we need to understand Bangladesh in greater detail. Then Bangladesh itself is situated in a very interesting, geographical region. It is surrounded by Bay of Bengal. Its boundary touches a large amount of sea and a large amount of the Indian Ocean. And I think that's where it's very important for us to, consider and take Bangladesh seriously, because, in the last few years, we've seen how is trying to intrude, how China is trying to get a share in the Indian Ocean. It is a non-resident power in Indian Ocean. Still, it wants to be a part of the Indian Ocean. So I think any country in South Asia, in the Indian subcontinent, any country that has access to maritime domain should be on our radar, should be taken seriously by New Delhi. So I think these are few reasons why Bangladesh is important. But then if you look at Bangladesh carefully and you look at its economy in today's date, most important thing is that, there was a time when we used to say that Bangladesh is a basket case. And I remember when I was growing up, a lot of people used to say that the Bangladeshi, they have a very, very, poor lifestyle, and the poverty was the biggest news coming from that country. And I still remember people struggling to even get 2 meals in a day. But today, if you look at Bangladesh, it is I think the most successful story in Indian subcontinent after India, because Bangladesh, which had an economy much smaller than Pakistan, Bangladesh, which was deliberately kept underdeveloped when it was existing as East Pakistan by the Pakistanis, that country has today turned around its economic fate. Today, that country has become one of the greatest economic success story in the Indian subcontinent. So at a time when you're talking about countries like Pakistan, which are completely downward, which are completely, their economy is in shambles, then you have another country in India's neighborhood, which is a shining example of development and progress. And I think that's Bangladesh. In today's date, if you look at the GDP of Bangladesh, it is close to around $420 billion. And this GDP, $420 billion, no doubt in comparison to India, it's a quite smaller economy. India is a 4 trillion economy. It's roughly 3.7, 3.8. So I've rounded it off to 4 trillion. But in comparison to India, obviously, Bangladesh is not that huge an economy. But ultimately, among all the India's neighbors, I think, I don't think stats also speak for themselves. Bangladesh currently is the second largest economy in the entire South Asian region. So at the time when we used to say that number 1 is India, number 2 is Pakistan, number 3 is Bangladesh, that has changed. And now number 1 economy in South Asia is India, number 2 is Bangladesh, and then number 3 is Pakistan. So that is the kind of, achievement that Bangladesh has done. It has secured a great economic destiny for its people. So I think that kind of transformation makes anyone interested in Bangladesh, and as a 4 trillion economy ourselves, and as a country which is trying to, build our own economic strength, I think Bangladesh is the best partner to have in our vicinity. Now, why am I saying so? There are very few countries in the world with which India has a trade surplus. And Bangladesh, luckily, is that country. Last year, in the last financial year, which is 2022 between to 2023, there was a 12 billion trade between India and Bangladesh. And out of that, there was a 10 billion surplus. So I think Bangladesh is a growing market, and it has huge demand for Indian products. It has huge, that type of appetite to accept India's product. And when we are trying to become a manufacturing success story, when we are trying to focus on our own industrial strength, I think that's a great opportunity for us to capture the market in Bangladesh. So this is why Bangladesh is again more important. Then if you look at the geography of Bangladesh, like earlier also I've told about its access to Bay of Bengal, India is trying to, it's trying to have an Act East policy. And in the last few years, especially in 2014, when Prime Minister Modi came to power, he changed the Look East policy to an Act East policy, which has given it a more dynamic and a more, active sort of a connotation. So I think when we talk about India's Act East policy, there also Bangladesh becomes a very important country, because India's access to territory on the eastern side is through the Bangladeshi territory only, because all of us know that, the Indian mainland and India's own northeast, they are connected with a very small a narrow piece of land, and that is known as the Chickens Corridor or the Siliguri Corridor. And sometimes I teach at a university which is in Nagaland, so I understand the local problems. And from that experience, also, I can tell you that sometimes it becomes very difficult for Indian people from the Indian mainland to access, India's own northeast. They don't sometimes have access to necessary things for security reasons, also logistical reason. Also, they don't have access to ports. Like Indian ports are far away, and Bangladeshi ports are nearer for those Indian states in the northeastern region. So I think that is also a fantastic example and a fantastic opportunity for us to engage with Bangladesh. Then, like I said, we have a 4,000-kilometer long border, and anything that happens in Bangladesh is a cause of concern for us. So I think that is also why we also need to keep an eye on Bangladesh all the time. And then lastly, I think Bangladesh's importance goes up further when we speak about rise of China. I'll speak about it in detail later, but just to put Bangladesh in perspective and why are we having this lecture today, is because I just want to touch upon why China's rise has made engaging with not just Bangladesh, but all our neighbors even more important. So I think that is how Bangladesh becomes a very important country for India. I understand India currently has a multi-aligned foreign policy. We are having good relations with every country in the world. We are buying oil from Russia. We are signing up for the new security architecture in the Indo-Pacific. India is doing great things. We are getting African Union into G20. I agree, we are doing all big things that are necessary to be done by a rising India. But at the same time, neighborhood remains important. At the same time, engaging with the neighborhood remains a very, very important priority for us. Now, I've already spoken about the first point, that why Bangladesh is important. Now let's focus on what has been the trajectory of India-Bangladesh relations. Because to appreciate what's happening today, to appreciate how things have become very pleasant, very friendly, very cooperative, to appreciate all of this, you first need to understand where it is coming from and how did it evolve. Because sometimes what happens is we look at our present and we say that it's not enough. But then if we look at our past and we compare the today with yesterday, then we feel, no, we have actually come a long way. And I believe that our relations with Bangladesh have also come a long, long way. Now, why am I saying that? India played a very important role in the creation of Bangladesh. And I think that was a lot due to Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's personal interest and her own diplomacy. And at that time, she did a fantastic job in contacting every single diplomatic capital that mattered in that day. She dispatched, diplomats to every single world capital, and they were convinced that what's happening in India is going to be a catastrophe, because the refugee crisis will occur and so many people will come on the Indian side, and it will be difficult for India to take care of them, and such kind of, effort that she put in it. And I think that along with the Indian Army's role of fighting with the Mukti Bahini, of fighting the Pakistani army, along with the people of East Pakistan who wanted freedom, who wanted liberation, that was the moment that culminated into the creation of Bangladesh. And at that moment, after immediate liberation of East Pakistan and its creation into Bangladesh, at that time, India had a huge goodwill in that country. It enjoyed a lot of goodwill, and Indian Army was respected. The Indira Gandhi, she was also very respected as a tall leader, as someone who's got a strong spine, and she's shown the power of conviction. She's shown that strength to take on the Pakistani army. But the irony is that, even Kautilya talks about it, that when you start sharing immediate border with another country, then it becomes your natural enemy. And that is something that also played out in the case of India-Bangladesh relations. Now, the problem was that after Bangladesh was created, India and Bangladesh signed a treaty in 1972 of friendship. And there was a sentiment in Bangladesh that the current government of the day, at that time, Awami League was powerful. And they thought that Awami League is pandering to Indian interests. Because Bangladesh was created after India's interference, a sort of mentality it took hold in Bangladesh that India is trying to play the role of a hegemon. Obviously, India is the largest country in the region. India's territory, India's population, India's economy is even greater than the sum of rest of the other countries. So that was true that India is naturally placed to play a dominant role in the region. No one can deny that fact because, ultimately, like I said, stats tell their own story. But this mindset had taken root in Bangladesh. And the second problem was that they were thankful to India, but then at the same time, a newly carved country, a newly independent country wanted to have an identity of its own. And when it wanted to have an identity of its own at that time, unfortunately, again, the Islamists, they captured power. And they started playing that card of, painting India as a Hindu country and painting themselves as an Islamic country and saying that, India is trying to interfere, India is trying to, and I'm not saying that on the basis of newspaper headlines. I have done a research on this. There are many journal articles written during that time. Many scholars have worked on the kind of image that India had at that time in the minds of the Bangladeshis. And literally, their newspaper reports, their books, their popular culture was full of references to India as a Hindu country. So when we today see, Modi's demonization as someone who's a Hindutva leader, the same thing was attempted with Indira Gandhi as well. She was hailed as the country, as a leader of a Hindu country like India, but at the same time, India was also demonized, and that role of religion was played up by the Islamists in Bangladesh. Unfortunately, the Islamist lobby got so powerful, and along with that, a military rule came in Bangladesh, and first Ziaur Rahman, and after that, H.M. Irshad. So both these leaders also have played a great role in undermining the secular polity, in undermining the secular fabric of Bangladesh, a country that was created on the basis of linguistic nationalism, a country that was created on the basis of Bengali nationalism, suddenly started giving more importance, more credence to their Islamist identity. So that started creating problems because then from there onwards, the Islamist elements, they took hold of power and radicalization of the people began. And that is how the security angle also came in. There were instances of insurgency in India's northeast. So, after Awami League went downwards, it was not that powerful anymore. The BNP, Bangladeshi Nationalist Party, came into power. And this continued all the way till in the 80s and the 90s, even in the early 2000s. If you see, there was always a power play. Either Khalida Zia was in power or Sheikh Hasina was in power. 2-3 times this actually happened. In 1996, Sheikh Hasina came to power. But then after that, there was a time when BNP was in power again. And when BNP was in power again, India's relations with Bangladesh suffered massively because there were two problems, like I said. First of all, there was no interest in Khalida Zia, who herself enjoyed a lot of support from the Islamist parties to have a thriving relations with India, because this has been India's tragedy. This has been a problem with us that, whenever our neighbors have a problem with us, whenever our neighbors don't like us, they always play the card of Islam, especially Pakistan and Bangladesh, even Maldives for that matter, what it is doing in today's date. So they always play this card and they try to, paint us as the bad guy, and they try to make us feel guilty about our own identity. So I think that's a problem. That's a huge problem in the Bangladeshi polity. That was a huge problem in Bangladeshi polity. And Khalida Zia made full use of her identity and her support from the Islamists. She paid visits to many countries like Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Malaysia, but she did not pay as much attention to India because she was trying to do what Erdogan is trying to do in Turkey. She attempted the same rule book and she tried to portray herself as the leader of the Islamic world. So that kind of validation also helped her sail her boat. So I think that is what took place in Bangladesh. But then ultimately there was another problem which was occurring side by side, and that was the rise of China. And when I say there was rise of China, then I want to say that in the early 2000s, if you look at statistics, Bangladesh trade with China was hardly 100 million. Only $100 million was their trade. But once China became a formidable economy, if you look at Chinese growth trajectory, till 1990, China and India were in comparable range. Both of them were around 220 to 50 billion economies. But after 1990, India could not catch up, whereas China, it surged ahead. It had a double-digit growth rate, and due to its industrial reforms and due to its forward-looking policy and setting up manufacturing base in the country, China surged ahead, and it ultimately started intruding and interfering in India's strategic backyard. So that was also a factor in the early 2000s that China had risen enough, and China's trade with Bangladesh reached from just $100 million to $3 billion. So that is how their trade quadrupled. That is how the exponential growth in trade started taking place. So I think this was a time when India India, on the other hand, was not ready for its movement under the sun. We had a coalition government in 2004 to 2014. There was a coalition government in India, and we had our own problem. Despite that, the Manmohan Singh administration, it played a great role in foreign policy by using the multi-aligned stand. So we talk about multi-aligned foreign policy in today's date, but even Manmohan Singh government played a great role in signing, many agreements and making sure that India's neighborhood has good relations with India. So his idea of shared prosperity, which Dr. Manmohan Singh gave, was into action. And luckily, Hasina, she came into power and she was able to, prove her mettle, and things started turning towards the warmer side in India-Bangladesh relations. So I think this is what happened till 2014. So till now, I have spoken about how, why you should be taking interest in Bangladesh and what was the historical trajectory of India-Bangladesh relations so far. Now let us come to the year 2014. And why am I coming to the year 2014 is because from 2014 till date, many things have changed in the India-Bangladesh equation. First of all, Prime Minister Modi came into power in 2014, and he has a record of having personal equation with almost all the leaders in the world. So if you go at the world level and you see his personal chemistry with leaders such as in Russia with Putin, or in US with Joe Biden, and before that with Donald Trump, I think he has a great personal interest in international relations. And when he was not in power, then that's true that his election campaign was full of high decibel attacks on Bangladesh. He made a similar attack few days ago as well. But when once he came into power, he was really serious about having good relations with the neighborhood, because he understood as a leader that if India wants to rise further, if India wants to become a great power, if India wants to make sure that its influence is not limited only to the subcontinent, but it goes beyond the subcontinent, then it is very necessary for India to take care of its neighborhood. Because if you do not have a stable neighborhood, then there is just no chance you would be able to focus elsewhere. And I think the best example is China, where the West has always tried to keep China constrained in the problems of Taiwan and Xinjiang and Tibet and so on. So I think West has played that card really well with China, and they have tried to attempt something similar with India as well. So having good relations with neighbors is a given, is a must, no matter which great power you are. All great powers, whether it was Britain or it was United States, or today if it's India, or before that it was China, all the great powers have a high responsibility of taking care of the neighborhood. So I think in 2014, when Prime Minister Modi, he assumed power, to his swearing in ceremony, the very first time when he was taking the oath to become the Prime Minister of the country, he made sure that he's inviting leaders from all the SAARC countries. So every single leader from every single SAARC country, not every single leader, leaders from every single SAARC country was invited to his swearing-in ceremony. We saw across SAARC, whether it was from Pakistan or Afghanistan or Bangladesh or Maldives, every leader was invited to his swearing-in ceremony, and that sent a loud message to the leaders in the neighborhood that this person, this new Prime Minister of India, means business, and he is serious about sharing India's, future, sharing India's destiny with its neighbors. So this message was sent by Modi, but unfortunately, it was not received as warmly in many other countries. But Bangladesh became a very good example of reading that message correctly. So what happened was that Sheikh Hasina herself was trying to have good relations with India. Her own politics, her own, campaign, and her own approach towards India is very, very friendly, and she sees India as a formidable development partner. And that personal chemistry of both the leaders, it translated into good things for the India-Bangladesh equation. Four things took place that that basically, paved the way for a high intensity cooperation between India and Bangladesh. There are multiple things that have taken place in the last decade between India and Bangladesh. But out of all the multiple things, I will focus on only four things, and these are the four most important things. First of all, the land boundary agreement settlement that took place. The sharing of enclave between India and Bangladesh was a watershed moment, because for a long time the land boundary dispute was not allowing the two countries to smell the coffee and wake up and realize that it is finally the 21st century and they need to be focusing on more things. So once this irritant of land boundary dispute was behind them, they the energy was free for them to focus on newer things. So what happened was that India, being the larger neighbor, showed a large heart, and 10,000 acres were given by India to Bangladesh. And I think that's an important example of how a large neighbor like India, used its diplomatic offices and used its, big-heartedness to make sure that Bangladesh, this message is sent in the Bangladesh polity, this message is sent to the people of Bangladesh that we in India want to actually cooperate with you, no matter a little, here and there of territory on friendly grounds is not a problem. Though all of us know that, territory is the most dear thing to any country in the world, but ultimately sometimes you have to pick and choose, and make that choice of having good relations with the neighbor. So I think for the larger picture of not missing the orchard for the apples, India finally took that stand and that agreement was done and dusted with. Secondly, the maritime cooperation between the two countries, and even the maritime cooperation was based on the settlement of the maritime dispute and the arbitration which was delivered to India and Bangladesh. India accepted it wholeheartedly. Four-fifths of the territory under dispute was granted to Bangladesh, but still here also India again showed a large heart, and India said, no, it's fine, I'm going to accept it. So the statements that came out from New Delhi were very conciliatory in nature. There was no revisionist thought. There was no grudges. There was no, sense of loss or despair that this has happened. It was welcomed by the good diplomatic offices in New Delhi. So I think those two decisions, along with that, one important thing took place, and that was Bangladesh granting transit rights to India. In today's date, across all modes of travel, whether it is inland shipping or it is by road also, or it is railways, Bangladesh has allowed India use of its territory to reach India's own northeast. Like earlier also I talked about how India's northeast is sort of landlocked because only a narrow piece of land connects India to its own northeast. But once Bangladesh agreed to give us transit rights, that problem was solved. And to appreciate Bangladesh, so on one hand, India is showing large-heartedness. On the other hand, Bangladesh is also showing large-heartedness. Now, why am I saying that we should appreciate Bangladesh granting this transit right? Is because on the east, we have a neighbor who has readily agreed to give us transit rights. But on the west, we have a neighbor who did not grant us a transit right, even when it was a humanitarian question. When the people in Afghanistan were suffering, they wanted wheat, they were starving. Even at that time, Pakistan did not allow transit rights. It did not grant transit rights to send them wheat. And today, finally, we have the Chabahar port, and we have skirted that issue as well. We can go via the Chabahar port to Iran, Central Asia, and beyond. So I think that is where Bangladesh must be appreciated and thanked that it granted India transit rights. So I think that is how it also evolved into a very mature relationship, and it became into a very trustworthy partner for India in its Act East push. Then always, since the Islamist turn in the Bangladeshi polity, in fact, in their constitution also, the word secular was removed. I think if we focus on the kind of problems that were emanating because of Bangladesh Islamist turn, was that a lot of radicalization of the youth was taking place. And these radicalized youth were becoming terrorists, and they were infiltrating in the Indian territory. Just like in Pakistan, we have terror bases. There was a time when Bangladesh also had terror bases, and these terror bases had radicalized youth being trained and being sent across Indian border, and they were creating problems not just along the border territory but deep into Indian cities. So that was a big problem. Also, the insurgency in the northeast, which uh, youngsters won't know how problematic it was once upon a time. But it was a very big issue for India because all these neighboring states, they share a, like I told you, 4,000-kilometer long border with Bangladesh. So it was very easy for any anti-India element to maybe, pay Bangladesh or help them with some sort of arms and ammunitions. And they could easily, trickle down all these drugs or maybe arms and everything via the Bangladeshi territory into Indian territory. So that was also a big problem. But due to Sheikh Hasina's forward-looking leadership, due to her, personal interest in making sure that her country's relations with India thrive, she took a stand on the Islamists, and she started first of all by cracking down on her own, enemies in Bangladesh who had murdered her father, assassinated him, and things like that. So she had a personal record as well. But then also as a leader, she knew that if Bangladesh has to progress further, then there is a need for Bangladesh to focus on, things which are important, and maybe democratize, rule of law, and things like that. So I think that's how Bangladeshi leader Sheikh Hasina ji, she played a very visionary role there, and she started taking on the Islamists. And once that happened, once India's complaints of terror fomenting from Bangladesh territory were taken seriously by Dhaka, that gave a lot of confidence to New Delhi that no, I am not going unanswered in Bangladesh. If there is a problem in Bangladesh, if there is any tension, erupting because of Bangladesh in India, I will be heard and I'll be given a patient hearing, and there will definitely be an action that will follow. So I think that kind of confidence in New Delhi sort of gave new wings to the India-Bangladesh equation to thrive. So that is how, post 2014, relations started changing between India and Bangladesh. And one more thing I would like to speak here is that till now, the leaders in Bangladesh had always played the Islam card. They had always raised the Kashmir issue because, all of us know here that Kashmir issue has been raised by countries ranging from Iran, Saudi Arabia, to Turkey, to Malaysia, to Pakistan, and even Bangladeshi leaders also play that card of Kashmir issue just to shame India that in Kashmir, Muslims are not being treated nicely and they are being persecuted and they want azadi from India. These are the kind of stuff that has come from Kashmir, which is not true. India is a secular country and everyone under the constitution is treated equally. Despite that, India was often shamed over this. India was often attacked over this. But after 2014, when so many confidence building measures in the form of all these dispute settlement and transit rights and all of this started taking place, a very interesting statement, and I personally want to talk about this. I mentioned this in my paper as well, that in 2018, one Bangladeshi minister, he said a very interesting thing. He said that India is home to the second largest population of Muslims in the world. And when India is home to the second largest population of Muslims in the world, India needs to be a part of the OIC. So I think that was a great recognition of how much India has, spent energy in becoming a secular polity, and we are giving an equal footing to, irrespective of, which religion do you belong to. We are giving an equal footing to everyone. Our constitution grants equal rights to everyone. So I think that was a fantastic recognition by Bangladesh that now the card of Islam is not going to be an irritant between India and Bangladesh relations, because both of us now recognize that, the way forward is to not talk about communal politics. The way forward is not to talk about divisions, but the way forward is to talk about shared identities. So I think this is something that the Bangladeshi leader, he said that statement, and it definitely was noted in New Delhi as well. And it's something that India can use later, because OIC is also used as a platform to attack India often. So I think if we are getting membership in one more organization, then why not? So that's my personal belief. And if one of you wants to debate me over this, it's fine. But I think we need to take it a little seriously. Now, why I am saying that, so I have focused on three aspects till now. I spoke about why Bangladesh is important. Then I also spoke about the future, the historical trajectory. Then I also spoke about the post 2014 transformation in ties. Now I'm going to explain to you that why all these changes have taken place. Why exactly, what has changed on ground that India and Bangladesh, that did not, two countries in the South Asian neighborhood. All of us who live in this subcontinent know that it is not Europe, where they have a common visa area and they have a common currency and so many things they have in common. And South Asia, in fact, is one of the least integrated regions in the world. Our trade with each other, our investment in each other's countries, our people to people contact is dismally and abysmally low. But most importantly, still India-Bangladesh relationship shines out. It is an exception, an exceptionally good relationship in the otherwise turbulent and the otherwise conflictual South Asia. So why am I saying so? What has basically changed on ground? I think a few things that we need to understand which have changed is, first of all, Bangladesh own turnaround, its own turnaround in the sense its own economic growth. Um, there was a time when Bangladesh was a basket case, but today, if you look at Bangladesh per capita income, it is around 2,600 US dollars, whereas India's per capita income is slightly lower than Bangladesh. So it is a factor of population, of course, but we have to look at the brute truth is this, that today Bangladesh has such a high per capita GDP. So why is that so? Is because Bangladesh understood in time that it needs to work on its economy. It used the textile sector as a great driver of economic growth. First of all, various investors were invited in the textile sector, and they knew they have labor on their side. Their biggest advantage was availability of cheap labor, and those labor intensive industries proved a boon for Bangladesh. And from textiles to plastics, today Bangladesh is scripting a good success story in India's neighborhood. So I think all that realization was there in Bangladesh. But why India? If you look at the kind of documents that come from Bangladesh today, whether it is their vision policy document or it is the State Bank of Bangladesh, giving the vision document for years ahead, or even their government planning for the future, their future plans always count India as one of the most formidable and dependable development partner. And that's because by 2026, Bangladesh is going to lose access to markets in the Western countries. And that's because Bangladesh used to be a least developing country. It was classified as LDC. And due to which, because of its status as an LDC country, it was granted a lot of concessions which will not be around in the future. So obviously, when these concessions won't be around for Bangladesh, now Bangladesh is really worried that how are we going to get access to markets bigger than our own country. So I think that there India plays a great role. Now, India's own market is booming. In the beginning of my lecture, I said that Bangladesh is a big market for us. That's true. But even India is a great market opportunity for Bangladeshi products. How? India is one of the largest, in fact, fastest major growing economy. Then our population is 1.4 billion. Now we are officially the largest population in the world. But this population is also a very, very, useful population because we have a demographic dividend. More than 65% of our population is below 35 years of age. I'm repeating again, 65% of our population is below 35 years of age. And that means that we have a huge demographic dividend on our side. Every single family in India today has more number of earners, more number of income, people who are getting an income, and less number of dependents, whether it is the old age people or the young children. So I think that is a important fact about India's own population. And that has translated into a huge middle class for India. We are home to one of the largest emerging middle class in the world. And everyone knows that if you have a large middle class, there is going to be demand. Like Prime Minister Modi also says, we have demography and we have demand and we have democracy. So I think we definitely have demand, and that demand is something that Bangladesh wants to capture. And it knows from its past experience that whenever it has taken turn towards communal politics, it has always spelled bad days for Bangladesh. So instead of going back to the times in fact, why going back to the times, look at Pakistani story. The hatred, the seeds of hatred sowed in the society have now started to bear fruit, that even people in Pakistan occupied Kashmir today don't have food to eat. They are protesting, they are being killed by the Pakistani rangers. On the other hand, you look at the Indian side of Kashmir. So I think Bangladesh has picked that lesson really nicely, and it has understood the importance of development. And because of this, there is democratization in the Bangladeshi society. There is rule of law in Bangladeshi society. In fact, I write a lot of articles for Bangladeshi publications as well. And sometimes it's very amusing for me as an Indian that I may criticize my own government because I am a fair and objective person. And I think that is the role and responsibility of every intellectual. But when I write that, the editor sometimes tells me that, no, you cannot say bad things about India because we value India as a very important partner for our country. So I think that is something that we need to understand when it comes to India-Bangladesh relations today. So the economic progress in Bangladesh has paved the way for it to understand India's value as a development partner. And like I said, that you do not want to go back to the times when the youth was radicalized. You do not want to go back to those sad times again, and you want to grow further. So I think Bangladesh wants to grow further. It doesn't want to grow back. Go back. Now, what about the Indian side? The Indian side also understands that today we are a 3.7 trillion economy and we want to become a 5 trillion economy. And then we want to become, once we become a 5 trillion economy, we'll obviously be the third largest economy in the world. And then we want to become 10 trillion plus because we have a huge population and even the government of the day is investing a lot in infrastructure and whatnot. So I think this is India's plan also, and youth is always aspirational and ambitious, and they want India to grow and they want India to become a great power. So I think that sort of understanding in New Delhi has changed New Delhi's approach towards its neighbors. So from I.K. Gujral's time when we talked about unilateral concessions to Manmohan Singh when we talked about shared prosperity, today Prime Minister Modi has the neighborhood first policy, and he is using a good mix of carrots and sticks. Carrots for those who are doing bad neighborly behavior with India. Carrots for those who are doing good neighborly behavior with India, those neighbors who are understanding India's case in subcontinent, those neighbors who are not creating security problems for India are treated with carrots, whereas those neighbors who have not mended their ways, those neighbors who are still a big security threat to us, who still allow their soil to be used for anti-India activities, they are being, treated with sticks. So I think incentivizing good neighborly behavior and incentivizing bad neighborly behavior is something that Indian Prime Minister has done really remarkably through his neighborhood first policy. So I think that's a change. In the future, both India and Bangladesh know that, neighborhood is something that we cannot change. We can change our friends, we can change a lot, but neighborhood is a given. We can't change our neighborhood. Obviously geographic reality is set in stone. So what do we do? So obviously, India, there is an understanding in New Delhi as well as in Dhaka that things are now going to be like this only. Some people do say that, today Sheikh Hasina is in power. When she goes out of power, then what will happen? In 2024, she came to power consecutively for the fifth time. She became the prime minister of the country. So many people say that once Hasina is out of power, then what will happen? Maybe BNP will come back in power, and maybe one day, all these shared gains that India and Bangladesh are creating together across different forums, whether it is BBIN or BIMSTEC or so many other organizations, all of that will be gone. But I personally believe that a society has changed. It is not just the leadership that has changed, but I think it is the entire society that has changed. These are not the times of living in the 70s and the 80s during the Cold War when, the neighborhood didn't used to see eye to eye and there were many problems. Now things have changed. India is not only registering growth in subcontinent, but India is also trying to become a formidable great power. It wants to increase its influence beyond the theater of South Asia. And it's already an Indian Ocean power. It wants to go further. And for that, it needs to have a stable neighborhood. And the only key to a stable neighborhood is to make them a stakeholder in your dreams, to make them a stakeholder in your future. So I think that's something that has been understood really well in New Delhi. Despite all this, some challenges remain, and I think few challenges that I would like to talk about is, first of all, the Teesta Water Treaty, which is being held hostage because of state politics. But then at the same time, there have been certain developments as well. I don't know how many of you followed the news, but the news has come that India wants to invest in the Tista water project. Bangladesh is coming up with a project to develop infrastructure in that region. And this time India took a step and India is saying that no, I am going to invest in it. So I think that's a good example of how New Delhi is now not willing to miss on any opportunity which is available to it. Then a few irritants are there, like sometimes in Bangladeshi cities or in towns, there are attacks on Hindus. So all of us know how partition was done, and all of us know the terms of the partition. That never a smooth transfer of population was allowed, due to which certain people who were of the Hindu identity were left behind in Pakistan as well as in Bangladesh. And sadly, due to the political nature of these countries, in India, we have a secular constitution and we give equal rights, but that's definitely not true in Pakistan and also not true in Bangladesh. So such, cases of young girls, young minor girls getting forcefully kidnapped and converted. And so I don't want to talk about the atrocities at detail here, but that definitely causes a lot of, public opinion, which that public opinion is formed and that public opinion is given back to the leadership. And then the leadership also sometimes uses, references to what's happening to the Hindus in Bangladesh from their in their speeches, or maybe when they're giving public interviews, and then that becomes a very securitization of identity. Then that becomes a problematic issue between India and Bangladesh, especially if we saw the CAA debate when India had amended its Citizenship Act to allow certain refugees who'd come till 2014 to get them some relaxation in the number of years of naturalization for citizenship. At that time, also, we'd seen this debate play out. So I think the reality is that partition has happened. Reality is that now all of us are separate countries. But then treating any human being badly, irrespective of religion, has no excuse whatsoever. So I think that is something which may cause a little irritant. It may prove to be a little irritant between India and Bangladesh, but something that can be managed. Then because India is growing, India is rising. So great powers always play dirty games, and when they play dirty games, they always use the neighborhood card. So no matter whether it is Soviet Union, no matter whether it is United States, no matter whether it is Great Britain, all great powers have faced this problem, that when they were rising, their own neighborhood were witnessing a lot of animosity. Their neighborhood became the biggest cause of concern. We saw that in the case of the rivalry that happened, continental rivalry that happened between Britain and France, when Great Britain was a great power. It was colonizing the entire world, but it had to fight world wars in its home theater. So I think that's something which is going to be true for India as well. On one hand, we have rise of China, which is a 17 trillion economy, and because China is a 17 trillion economy, it has much deeper pockets than India has. It has a Belt and Road Initiative. All the other South Asian countries are a part of it except Bhutan. Even Bhutan has started singing the tunes of China now. A few years earlier, it never wanted China to be a party to the Doklam issue. But recently, reports are coming from Thimphu that they want China to be a party to the Doklam issue. And if at all that issue gets China's way, if at all China has its way on that issue, then Doklam Plateau overlooks India's strategic Siliguri corridor region, and that again will be a security challenge for us. So I think with Bangladesh also the same thing holds true. India is always in a game of competition with China in its own neighborhood, and it always has to fight with other actors in making sure that its interests are protected in the neighborhood. So I think that's one challenge. China is one challenge, but then West is also a challenge, because when Sheikh Hasina was fighting her recent election, then the West had sponsored a lot of coverage, saying that she's trying to rig elections, she's trying to fix elections and stuff like that. And we all of us know that credit for keeping Bangladesh stable and firmly on the trajectory of growth and progress goes only and only to Sheikh Hasina. And if we remove Sheikh Hasina from Bangladesh at such a crucial juncture, it may again fall into the abyss of radicalization, and that may create a problem that may destabilize one of most important neighbors of India. So I think that is something which will be a problem, which is a problem right now and maybe a problem later. Ultimately, not everything is bad. Not everything we need to view with a pessimist lens. there are good things as well. And biggest opportunity, I think, is that India and Bangladesh, solely because of their economic growth, solely because of their promise to their own people of giving them a good standard of life, a good standard of living, have been able to do a lot of progress and cooperation. So they do not talk about things which are destructive. They talk about things that are constructive in nature. We do not have that good a relationship with any other neighbor as we have with Bangladesh. This India-Bangladesh relationship, in my view, can become the best example of the ideal or the model relationship for other countries in the region. And if we follow that, if every country can show that type of, open-heartedness towards India, and India can do the same with other countries, and I think South Asia is it will be the most prosper region in the world, and people will have a good standard of living. So I think this is a good example. India and Bangladesh is a good example, and it should be replicated. It should be emulated by other countries as well. And with this, I end my lecture. I have completed all the aspects, and I'll like to once again thank sir for inviting me for this lecture.
Thank you, Dr. Monica. You have given a very refreshing, very authoritative perspective on Indian foreign policy. It has come a long way. And not wasting time, I will just open the house to question answer session. And now please come with your questions. Be quick and be simple. And first introduce yourself. Please go on with your questions.
Sir, am I audible?
Yeah.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am. My name is Kaveri and I'm a PhD scholar. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your insightful lecture. Ma'am, my question to you is, what has been the role of soft power in enhancing the India-Bangladesh relations?
Okay. Kaveri, thank you so much for this question. This is an aspect that was missing from my lecture. When Prime Minister Modi, since the time he's come into power, he's talked about civilizational linkages. See, ours is an ancient civilization, and biggest soft power for India is our civilization. For thousands of centuries, India has been existing, and India has shared culture with not just Bangladesh, with Iran or the Persian culture, with Central Asian countries. For example, we used to share the same empire, the Kushan Empire, which ruled Central Asia, and it used to rule India as well. In case of Bangladesh also, when it comes to soft power, there are multiple, factors. First of all, the civilizational linkages. Bangladesh is a part of India's circuit, the Buddhist circuit or some circuit that they're coming up with. So there, Bangladesh is a part of India's plans. Then I talked to many. In fact, you are also a youngster. If you look at today Instagram reels or you look at YouTube videos, people of Bangladesh, they want to understand what India is thinking. They want to have a two-way communication. So there's a lot of exchange between not just intellectuals, but there is also a lot of exchange between people who are into low culture, as in popular culture. So I think that is also a great soft power for India. But then, with a little caution, I'll tell you, soft power is very helpful to make images. Soft power is very helpful to make a country our friend. But ultimately, we need to look at tangibles. So you can look at tangibles and maybe avoid soft power for a day, but you can't avoid tangibles and just keep looking at the soft power. So that will be my precise answer to your question.
Thank you so much.
Next question, please. Come on, be quick. Pratna, have you any questions?
Sir, can I ask one more question?
Just wait. Let others.
Okay.
If they don't, then I will certainly
Sure.
allow it.
Okay.
Yes. Anyone else? Munir Kaisar? No questions. Okay. Now, Kaveri, you go ahead with your question.
Thank you, sir. Ma'am, my second question to you is, I'm a research scholar studying India-Japan relations. So my question is related to Japan. I wanted to know how effective has been the role of Japan in the development of Bangladesh. If you can shed some light on it.
I think that's a very good question again, Kaveri, because India and Japan relations have changed a lot after the end of the Cold War. During the Cold War, we didn't used to see eye to eye because India was on the different side and Japan was on a different side. And we used to think that Japan is a vassal state of the United States. But after the Cold War, relations have turned really warm, and especially after the introduction of the concept of Indo-Pacific, where Shinzo Abe talked about, India and Japan role together in Indo-Pacific to counter China. So I think that's important. Interestingly, Japan as a partner for India is doing great things in India's Northeast. So if you go to the Northeast region, you will find that Northeast is a very difficult terrain. It is not easy to develop India's Northeast because sometimes it is mountainous. Then there is also a lot of, question of identity because it is home to different tribes and they have their own customs and things. So it's a very difficult place to develop. But luckily, one of the India's partners in the Indo-Pacific, which has readily signed on to develop India's Northeast, is Japan. And in Bangladesh also, not just Japan, but also Australia as well. There are other Indo-Pacific countries which are playing a great role in helping India to develop its neighborhood. So in Bangladesh also, you can see many projects are coming up, which are either funded by Japan or some concessional loan has been given by Japan. And they're also doing a lot of consultationary work, as in high technology or some, if there is an obstacle in some project, then Japanese are very willing to share their technical know-how and give their knowledge. So I think that is something that you can look into as a scholar.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Kaveri, for asking intelligent questions. I think, Dr. Monica, we have taken a lot of your time, but just one query about the India-Bangladesh relation. Do you think it is the political instability in our neighborhood that has been the biggest obstacle in having normal relations with India? I mean, besides being communal factor or anything, I think the most important part is relationship is that their own local, political feuds and rivalries, they, don't allow the bilateral relationship to move forward. Whether it is Maldives, whether it is Bangladesh, or it is Sri Lanka, any country, except Pakistan, they are all unanimous what they think about India. But political rivalries are there. Even in Nepal, I think that is one of the factors. So, what you have to say about this political instability in a neighborhood?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you that lack of political stability in the neighborhood has led to the kind of, strained relations that India has with its neighbors. And you rightly pointed out all the examples, whether it is Bangladesh, the, fight between Awami League versus the BNP. Then in Maldives also, one section of politicians, they understand India's importance. But then since the day Muizu has come into power, he wants to Islamize the polity. He wants to play into China's hands. And just to hold on to their own power, they sometimes use India as the scapegoat. The same thing happened in Nepal also. During the COVID pandemic, when the leaders of that country were not able to hold on to power, immediately they started playing the nationalism card. And they played this nationalism card by showing the India fear that if you don't allow me to be in power, if you take the power away from me, then India will intrude. Then India will come. Whereas India does not have time to do all that. We have our own problems and our own things to do. But they have always constantly, used India to get even at each other. That no, don't vote for this particular leader. If you vote for this leader, it's closer to India. I think the same thing happened in Maldives also. Before Muizu, when the last time also there was an anti-India leader in Maldives, the entire economy of Maldives collapsed. In fact, the Chinese are not like Indians. Indians, we are really good when it comes to economic cooperation. We do that on equal terms. We never bombard them with concessional loans and later take their territory. But that is exactly what Maldives had done, what China had done. It had taken over the entire resort business of Maldives. So their own politics, their own political games, sometimes their own politicians use India as a card. So I think this is something that India should heavily discourage. and tell every leader to not, to be using India as a scapegoat.
So thank you very much for elaborating that point. Now, I think I will thank you for sparing time for this wonderful session. I know you are a busy person, and we hope to have your cooperation in future also. And whenever we need you, I think you will be available for us. So thank you very much. And with that, with your permission, I would like to close the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for inviting me. It's always a great pleasure to speak to you and get guidance from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.